America's new ghost towns revealed. Crime-ridden San Francisco, St. Louis, and Portland remain deserted as downtowns elsewhere bounce back from the pandemic, a study shows. I believe the cell phone data is one of the truest measures of where you've got activity, meaning you've got people. We always talk about foot traffic in a downtown core. Well, nothing says foot traffic more than people walking around with cell phones, because everybody's got a cell phone now, right? So we've got different metrics now that we can attribute to whether this city is recovering or this city, based on its policies, is just tanking, like San Francisco and Portland. We've got cell phone data, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's see what the deal is. Do we have new ghost towns revealed? Well, it's a downtown core. Let's get into it. Here we go. So we touched on this subject. I think it was, maybe a little bit after the pandemic was over. And a lot of the data, it was a super interesting study, and it's basically based on activity of cell phones. Now, who's got more people in their downtown core walking around? Who doesn't? Oh, hey, that correlates with what we know to be happening with business closures or businesses opening up. We don't cover a lot of businesses opening up here on News for Reasonable People because those towns are doing just fine. Areas where businesses are opening up, they're all squared away. They don't have the crime policies. They didn't defund the police. They didn't go down this litany of, it's okay. Go ahead and decriminalize drugs, decriminalize crime. It's all right. They didn't go down those pathways. This study is kind of one more of those things where you go, okay, policy, here's your sign, right? Downtown areas of San Francisco, St. Louis, Portland, Oregon, and other North American cities remain deserted months after the pandemic waned, despite many urban areas bouncing back to life, new data show. Researchers tracked smartphone use across 63 cities and found that San Francisco, which is battling waves of crime and homeless addicts on its streets, only has 32% of the activity that was recorded before the pandemic. Man, it has lost almost 70% of its folks downtown. 70%. That is a ghost town. Got to agree. That's a ghost town. And on a business and on a budgetary level, San Fran about to take a pounding. And not in a good way, right? It's already doing that, right? Meanwhile, Utah's Salt Lake City, what's Salt Lake City's, what's their stance on drugs? Yeah, I think you can pretty much still go to jail for a long time for weed in Salt Lake City. And did Salt Lake City, did they defund their, no, I don't think they did. I think they were reasonable, weren't they? Yeah. Do they allow people to just be homeless willy-nilly everywhere in Salt Lake City? Yeah, I don't think so. They've got kind of that whole moral thing going on, right? It's the way it is. So you might say, it's not based on policy. Yes, it is. This is literally what we're saying. Meanwhile, Utah's Salt Lake City has bounced back strongest with 139% more cell phone activity nowadays than was seen before the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, shuttering schools, offices, and public transport and widespread lockdowns. That was the most ridiculous horseshit ever. I was like, I am so ashamed that we are shutting all these cities down. There's no need. There's no need to do that. Take the people that are at risk, get them squared away. No issues doing that. People with pre-existing conditions, zero. It's the elderly, the ones that we know. Hey, if these folks get it, it's going to have a hard time. I'm not saying that in any way, shape or form, but everybody else, hey, you still got to run the economy or not, depending on how you see it based on this. Other cities with downtown areas that are springing back to life include Bakersfield, Fresno, San Diego in California, Columbus, Ohio, El Paso, Texas, and Baltimore, Maryland. Now, you've got some other stuff going on here. You may have an industry leave a town, or you may have an industry come to town. You've got some of that going on. But what I found the most interesting is that the ones on the low end of the totem pole, least amount of activity, have the greatest concentrations of what I talk about on this podcast, which are drug addiction, crime, shoplifting, businesses leaving. I mean, St. Louis at 38%, St. Louis, murder capital of the United States, 38%, it's come back. Okay. That's not great. And then you've got the downtown cores of like a Bakersfield and a Fresno. They're very small. They're way smaller than a San Fran. So that can be impacted. But what I'm how about Minneapolis? They're another city that's just been a train wreck, right? A train wreck. They're at 41% of where they were before the pandemic. Portland at 40%. Even Seattle is not all that great. I think at 48%. We'll get to that in a second here. All right, here we go. A homeless dope fiend is passed out on the street near City Hall. It's like, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of people when you've got open air drug markets and you got all kinds of shoplifting, criminal actions going on. There aren't enough police. That whole litany of things we talk about all the time here, because this is literally what's going on. And now you've got just this string of major businesses leaving a San Fran, leaving a Portland, leaving a wherever, Chicago. The research adds to fears that soft on crime policies in ultra-liberal cities like San Fran and Portland have driven up rates of lawlessness and other social problems, leading to an exodus of people as part of a longer-term decline. And it's not necessarily an exodus of people. A lot of times it's an exodus of employees who used to commute into the downtown and no longer do. Here in Seattle, another ultra-liberal city, although our Mayor Bruce Harrell, he's getting after some stuff. I respect the job that he's done. And, he comes right out and says, hey, things aren't perfect in Seattle. At least we're not Portland. I'm kind of like, that's true. That's true. Unfortunately, some downtowns are still stuck, said Karen Chappell. She's the director of the University of Toronto's School of Cities, upon releasing the Institute's latest findings. So we talked about this, and the data wasn't all that much different as far as which city sat where within the older study that I podcasted on. Her team measured the number of smartphones pinging off cell phone towers in city centers from December 2022 to February 2023. So that's very recent, right? So basically end of Q4, beginning of, first 2 months of Q1 in 2023, Q4 in 2022, and then compared them against the same period in 2019 and 2020. And so much of what has happened is in tech-centric cities. What kind of employees you have. Well, San Francisco being the poster child of tech. A lot of its employees are not back in the downtown core. I know you've got businesses. You got Elon Musk saying, hey, you're coming back to the office. Jamie Dimon of Chase says, yeah, you're all coming back. Even Amazon said, yeah, you're coming back 3 days a week. But that's a perfect example of, okay, so you got people back in the office 3 days a week. That means the majority of days people are not in the downtown. 4. You got Monday, you got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Majority of people are not in the downtown core, even on a normal work schedule, where downtown cores used to just be, busy, bustling. And they are for some cities, but not the ones that we talk about on this channel, right? Chappell says cell phone usage is a better measure of activity than other standards, such as office vacancy rates. Now, that is one thing that I think you're going to have some pretty massive debate, just like we are kind of on crime rates now. Deal with crime rates is, I think a lot of crime is flat not being reported. It's just not. People are like, no cop's ever going to come. Plus, this is not my first rodeo with being broken into, with being stolen from, with, being robbed, assaulted, whatever. I'm just going to let it go. I'm not going to call the police. Police are too busy in a lot of these cities. They're underfunded. They've been defunded. So you don't have an accurate portrayal of the criminal actions that are actually going on. And then office vacancy rates. I think you've already got office vacancy rates that are much higher than they were pre-pandemic. I mean, in some of these cities, you had virtually no vacancy rates. Now, I think you've got an onslaught of vacancies coming, vacancy, rates escalating. And I think you're going to have a major, major correction in commercial real estate. I really do, because of the way that businesses handled, we're going to move all our folks out because the pandemic and they're telling us to close down. We're going to have them all work remotely. And hey, they don't want to go back to the office in downtown where things aren't so great. Shocking, right? So you got office vacancy rates, public transportation ridership is way down, especially in the bottom tier of the cities that have minimal, recovery. And it's because you got a bunch of people riding around doing drugs. That's what you got going on in your public transportation. I mean, I record those podcasts here fairly often. All right, we're doing a study here in University of Washington is doing a study on the impacts of repeated exposure in your workplace, which is bus driver, to fentanyl smoke. And one of our health officials here in Seattle our Washington State comes right out and says, there's no studies to say that sucking in secondhand fentanyl smoke is bad. There's no studies to say that. So, and plus we like to have our drug addicts all do drugs together. That way, if they OD, somebody's around to give them a little Narcan. Yeah, that's my state. That's my city. Yeah, genius. We've got some genius people here in the Pacific Northwest. A little diversity makes the world go around. Now, it just gives me podcast, fodder for days, weeks, months, years. So we got public transportation ridership as another indication of things going down, or total retail sales. Saying it's a much more comprehensive indicator, and I believe it is. It makes sense because it actually tracks the number of people, not based on these under indicators that we've only had in the past, because we didn't have cell phones. Now you got cell phones. Now you've got a true indicator of people walking around in a downtown. Now, does that mean that people walking around with a cell phone in downtown are spending money, causing, this revival? Causing businesses to go, yes, let's double down and invest more in this city? No, but it's a pretty darn good indicator, right? The odds are if you got a whole bunch of people walking around, eventually some of those are going to get thirsty and they're going to stop in a business and get a drink. They're going to go eat. They're going to go buy some stuff. All that stuff kind of works together, right? They're going to eat out after work. If they're at work, they're going to go to dinner with friends, coworker, whatever. They're going to do all that stuff. So to me, this makes total sense. So the research showcases huge differences between North American cities. Some are busier than they were before the pandemic. Others are witnessing a sluggish recovery that poses tough questions for their economic survival, meaning, will they survive moving on? And the cities have some massive budget shortfalls that will be coming. I wouldn't be surprised if we had a federal bailout to many of these cities. The problem is long-term, how are you going to solve this? How are you going to create greater tax base? Ask somebody in like Detroit. It's taken years and years and years for that to kind of work its way through. And it's still not done, right? Everybody always talks about Portland being the next Detroit. The longer I do this, the more podcasts I do on this, I think maybe they're not all wrong, right? Millions of Americans stayed home during the pandemic. Others relocated for cheaper rents, lower taxes, and more outdoorsy lifestyles across the South, Sun Belt, and West, thanks to remote working. They did. I mean, we've all got examples of that. I was, talking with, did kind of the mastermind on Peter Zevenbergen's boat the other day. Jonathan Cho was there, but a real estate agent was there. A real estate broker was there. My state of Washington decided, well, let's not confuse everybody. Let's call everybody brokers. Used to be that if I was the owner and managing broker, I was like the kingpin. I'm called a broker, right? Managing broker. It's the guy or gal who runs the office, has the designated managing broker's license, which I have. But now my state refers to everybody as a broker. So everybody, do you run the company? No, it's just what we're called. They used to be real estate agents, but Washington's got to be confusing. It's just got to be kind of, yeah, let's do this. Nobody else is doing this. Let's do this because we're special. We're far upper left USA. Yeah. Anyway, I was talking to a real estate broker and, I was talking to her about, hey, did you sell any homes during the pandemic to people leaving? We had that conversation. And I think every broker typically has those stories. Yeah, I had clients leave, condo in downtown. They moved further out. They wanted to get a little bit of land. They wanted to get some acreage, or they moved out of state altogether. And that's one of those talks we had. We had clients move from Summit. We had clients move to, Florida, Idaho, Utah, Montana, all of your standard kind of, well, there's more freedom there. Why wouldn't I go there? Whereas here in the state of Washington, we just basically had our freedom stripped. And it's like, you little minions, you guys just got a deal. Okay, you can go to a restaurant. No, you can't go to a restaurant. Restaurants are okay. Oh, no. Standing up, no mask, sitting down, mask, oh, did I get that wrong? Oh, geez, do I get a penalty? You're going to lose your job if you don't have the jab. I mean, what was that all about? Really? I mean, can you believe that we went through a period where people were getting fired? And if you're one of those ones that did, you know what I'm talking about? But it's like our employment is based on getting a jab? Huh. Of something that hasn't really been around all that long and maybe is, deemed to be experimental. Weird. So this has been a huge problem for many downtown economies, talking about not having the full workforce back yet, which have historically depended on commuting workers to boost a city's daytime population and spend more at stores and restaurants. San Francisco is perhaps the most extreme example of this trend. Let's go down and here we go. Okay, let's look at the bottom of the list. I want to look at the bottom of the list. Leading the rear, coming up right from the back of the pack, but not gaining any traction is San Francisco. They are at 32% of the amount of cell phone activity pre-pandemic. They lost 70%, right? Numero dos, St. Louis. Numero tres, Portland, Oregon. Now, you might say, well, Portland had, the 100 nights of unrest. And I would say, and how's that working out for Portland's recovery? Not all that well. Did Portland defund its police? Yeah, they did. Does Portland have ongoing struggles? Yes, they do. Right? I mean, this isn't rocket science. Indianapolis. We got Minneapolis. We've talked about Minneapolis, home of George Floyd incident, right? Cleveland. How's that working out, Cleveland? Oakland. I was talking to my last podcast about a homeless encampment in Oakland that been started on getting cleared out. And it's like 26 blocks long. It's like, what? I mean, just, block. I believe that I saw that in one of Nick Johnson's videos. He focused on, good things in America, but a lot of crappy things in Oakland. He was just driving this one stretch and it was just like block after block after block of just literally, like Elon Musk called San Francisco post-apocalyptic. It just looked like, I don't know, it looked like the tent people from Star Wars, you know what I mean? Just like, what's going on here? Don't really know. We got Kansas City, another high criminal activity area. We got Toronto. We got Philadelphia, home of Kensington Avenue. Is that shocking that their downtown is not recovering? Not really. We got Montreal. We got New Orleans, another murder capital of the world. How about Seattle at 48%? Now, Seattle has been on the struggle bus, yes, but they have been trying to move very hard positively with their downtown core. There's a lot of things I see from a business standpoint that are going in the right direction there, but they're just not quite there yet. So they are still at less than 50% of activity, and that is not good. And unfortunately, so you bring in a new mayor like we did with Bruce Harrell, there's only so much he can do without having the tools to take all these addicts and put them in rehab, because that's what's causing the vast majority of the craziness that you experience, that you see in the areas of Seattle where the whack-a-mole game has been played and they whack the homeless people, drug addicts out of downtown. Now they go further south. Now they go further north. And so there's communities like Ballard, in, a neighborhood to the north of downtown in Seattle, that has experienced some of that push, that whack-a-mole. Okay, they're whacked out of downtown. They get pushed to a, nearby suburban community. You're seeing that happen and the downtown stuff being cleared out. But unless the mayor has the ability to throw people in jail, a mental institution, or into rehab, because rehab treatment is housing, unless they can do that, the problems still just kind of, keep going. And in Seattle, you've got some major occupancy issues in the downtown. We know this. We know we've got high vacancy rates. High vacancy rates translate to lack of tax revenue. Not good. Because all those employees went to the burbs. They've never come back. Literally, I've podcasted stories about businesses saying, hey, no to the downtown, but you know what? We're going to move to the burb and make it happen, because follow the money. The money is now in the burbs, right? It's not in downtown. So a lot of these downtowns, Atlanta, Calgary, we got Raleigh, North Carolina, we got Vancouver, BC, another massive bastion of homelessness here on the West Coast. And you want to talk about some liberal policy. Vancouver, BC is right up there. Then we get into Detroit. We get into Boston, Louisville. These are all middle of the pack at around 50. So some of the reason behind like a San Francisco being way behind recovery from like a Bakersfield is because it's got such a concentration, like we're about to read here, of the tech sector. The California hub's high concentration of tech employees saw a huge proportion of its workforce decamp during the pandemic. Many have not returned, thanks to the option of remote work and signs of urban decay on the streets. You've got kind of two parts to that narrative. And you might not have urban decay on your streets, but you've still got businesses that have pulled out because now they've realized, hey, we can still get most of the productivity out of the folks that we need without paying for all that office space. So that's what's really rocked the commercial space. But then when you've got that work from home viable for lots of companies on top of the urban decay, that's when you got kind of the double whammy. And then you look and your streets end up looking like the Road Warrior. So, maybe Fury Road. Right? Maybe Mad Max, something along those lines. This week, Nordstrom said it was closing both of its downtown San Francisco stores. Other retailers, including Whole Foods, Anthropologie, Office Depot, CB2. I mean, you've got 17 stores that have left since the pandemic in one kind of shopping mall area. 17. And they were, major stores like we're talking about right here. New York ranks relatively positively, attracting back 75% of its pre-pandemic downtown footfall. Now, and thanks in part to its resilient economy, the lure of its financial center, and with business and political chiefs pushing for an end to remote work. So that's another thing is how leadership within these cities, some of these cities are they're so overwhelmed with what they've got going on that they can't even begin to start working on their business leaders to get people back to the downtown. Now in New York, to me, New York has a real pull to it. People just love being there. They love that. They love the urban decay. They're okay with it. They've been dealing with it for years. Other cities, not so much. Portland, not so much. They've gotten used to that as well, but it's also really reflected in their numbers. And to me, New York, it's a city where people are going to go no matter what, right? They're going to go back to it. And it's such a financial district. It's got so much going on that there's it's not as tech heavy as a San Francisco. So from that standpoint, it does not surprise me at all that it has recovered far better than the vast majority of others. And as the warmer weather arrives across much of North America, people are expected to venture out more to downtown dining spots and watering holes. Just not in downtown, right? Over the longer term, New York and other cities are converting empty office blocks into residences. That one to me is a little confounding. If it's part of your overall strategy, yeah, that might work out. But having a bunch of people versus having a bunch of businesses, the downtown core is meant to have businesses. It's not really designed to have, just a big percentage of its population. But because there are no other options right now, well, we got to do something. Let's make it into I think one of the big ideas was to make either San Francisco or Portland into student housing. Yeah, well, let's just convert it into student housing. This will work out. I mean, some school's going to want to go ahead and, bring their school into our downtown core and, pretend to teach the kiddies something about something. Yeah, maybe they'll get a firsthand, education on criminal activity, drugs, homelessness, social decay, urban economics, their lack thereof, something along those lines. San Francisco's decline has been spotlighted once again by a sharp uptick in overdose deaths among the city's homeless population. So can't get too far into that because this video will just be, ixnayed on that, So going to wrap up this article, but this was and if you want to check it out, this is on the Daily Mail. You can find it on our Discord channel. That's Reasonable Plus. I post all of these articles on there if you want to look around. Plus, we got a bunch of other stuff going on there. You can chat with people. You can put up funny stuff. It's just a way to communicate with other reasonable people. So Reasonable Plus on Discord. Check it out. It's free. It's fun stuff. Thanks again for being here. I'd love to have you subscribe if you haven't already. Share the content with your friends, family, whatever, with your dog groomer. I don't care. Just share it. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. Thanks again for being here.